Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar, the TV podcast where we sit down and talk about hit television show Avatar The Last Airbender. I am Dan and I'm joined by the late Airbender himself, the person late to the show, Chris Billingham. How you doing, Chris? Woo.
I'm good, man. I'm good. Ready to talk Zuko, Aang, the gang. Yeah,
and general awkwardness.
That was great, wasn't it? Because I started that by being like, "I'm good, man. I'm ready," and then it just trailed off into simply naming characters from the show.
Very much implying you're not that ready to talk. It's like you're not that. I'm great, man. It's and I'm going to lose all steam immediately, suggesting that I do not have the energy for this podcast. Yes, Chris. I also had to. My alarm also went off at 7:30. Fuck you. We're doing this quite early today because Chris has work, which I'm telling listeners for two reasons. Because one, we've both just decided, we both just said, let's keep this one tight and thumbs up because the last two episodes, maybe three, have been a bit out of control in terms of length and rambling at the end, and this cannot devolve into that. So there you go. With that said, we've still not talked about the episode of television yet. So shall I?
With that said, Dan, what are your favourite condiments?
One of my favourite condiments. All right, number 57. So
people got so. I sent that list to people. They got so angry about the inclusion of things like whipped cream, and I was like, it's a dessert condiment, and yeah, it turned into a whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, Chris. I think I would have challenged things more if you hadn't had 50 odd items on that list. But I was like, if I challenge one, how many am I going to challenge? And if I challenge multiple ones, where are we at? Where are we at as a society?
I had the time of my life.
I'm sure. No, it's clear. It's clear you did. Emphasis on you. Anyway, let's do this podcast. This is the episode for those who don't know. It's the final. It's the final temple. We did it. We've seen all the temples. It's the Western Air Temple, everyone. This is the episode in which the gang arrive at the Western Air Temple at the same time Zuko does. We're not dicking about. We're not wasting any time. Zuko was following them last episode. You probably thought, is it going to be an episode or two till he catches up? Nope. They're there. They arrive at the same time. Awkwardness ensues. The moment that me and Nadia literally used to describe this episode to each other, which is, "Hi there, Zuko here," which when I said to Nadia, do you want to watch this one with me? Because she's been dipping in and out with me as we've been doing this, depending on if she's free when I'm watching the episode or need to watch the episode. And last night I said, I'm going to have to watch an episode of Avatar. She goes, "Oh, which one?" And I was like, "Hi there, Zuko here." And she was like, "Yes, I am in." Because we are both big fans of how awkward this is. So yeah, this is the episode where Zuko tries to convince the gang that he can join and be part of the group and teach Aang firebending. But very inconveniently, the assassin he hired to murder them shows up, and they have to deal with that. It ends with, of course, them very, very reluctantly letting Zuko join.
Yes,
so yeah,
Katara especially.
But yes, basically a threat of murder at the end, which I like. Yeah. It's honestly, with the first season, we sort of talked about how Katara kind of a bit of a frustrating wet blanket sometimes. It depends on how she's written. She's a character that can be written really well and be very engaging, or she's a character that can come across quite quickly as very unlikable if you just nudge her one way or the other over the line. This is definitely in the interesting, strong. This is the version of Katara that I like best when she's like this. Same with when in the one with the blood bending. What was that episode called? Can't remember. But the spooky Halloween one where Katara was all badass.
I can't remember what it was called, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The Puppet Master. Katara really gets a lot of moments to shine in this series. More so, very much more so than in the first, when we had a running gag about me not particularly caring for the character. This is one of those moments where I'm just like, yes, absolutely. This is where everything starts to make sense for her. For me, coming down on Zuko, particularly harshly, when she lost her mother to the Fire Nation, but then you also know what they've been through together. She knows what Zuko specifically has put together, and she also was already betrayed by Zuko in this way. The gang haven't all been told by Zuko that he's changed before. she has. She's already been betrayed once, and she's told the other guys about that story, but they didn't experience that story.
Yeah.
So she really has the most logical reason to not trust him still. But she's also, a powerful bender in her own right, to borrow that phrase from the Antler episode. We had a chuckle about that at the time. I vaguely remember.
We did.
So yeah,
we devolved the podcast into an episode of In-Betweeners briefly.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's I think the Katara stuff is like some of my favorite stuff in this episode. But the episode in the whole, I'm really a big fan of. But I'm very curious, Chris, because this is what you wanted. Last week you talked about it. You were so excited. At the end of last episode, you were like, "Let's get them together. Let Zuko join up. He can teach Aang firebending." You were all on board for all the ideas. So hopefully the episode delivered for you.
Yeah, definitely. I loved it. In fact, I'll be honest with you, Dan. I watched it after last week's recording, and then rewatched it this morning.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I was pumped. I think it's it's fan services at its best. There are nitpicks. Like, I just think there must be better ways to phrase it than "I'm good now." like you've had trouble being good in the past. I was like, Christ, are we really like boiling this down to good or evil,
right,
or good or bad? But it's all washed away by some really lovely emotive Iroh flashbacks. It's some really logical exploration. Like, I think they have to do, and I think they've done enough in the past. There's a lot of they're having to, I wouldn't say tweak Zuko's character, but play into elements of Zuko we've only seen in passing. So like that opening talking to a frog thing, like you say, where he like does impressions of Iroh.
We'll come back to the impressions.
And Azula, and it's just like, Zuko's now comic relief. Okay, fine. Like, and it's they've had shades of that in the past and moments like that, but a lot of the time he's been a grouchy teenager. So I think they've done enough in the past, and they've done enough recently to build to this that you let that wash. But in the main, it's very funny, entertaining, good interactions. I really like the notion of Toph reaching out to him and him accidentally burning her. That was all really clever. A little bit, right? How do we make them get him on side? Okay, let's have him basically help them destroy Combustion Man. And it's like, is that an obvious thing to do? Yeah, but actually, you got 22 minutes. You gotta, we don't want to dick about with this. I really, really, one of my favorite moments, it's such a small moment, was Zuko saying, "If you won't accept me as a friend, maybe you'll accept me as a prisoner." I just thought that was like such a brilliant insight into where that character is now, and his sort of desperation, and how he's changed, and how he just wants to, he really believes in this quest so much that he's willing to give up his freedom. And equally the gang being like, no, fuck that, we don't even want that, was also cool. You maybe could have explored that more and maybe done something with that instead of the kind of Combustion Man thing. But that's, again, those are all even minor than nitpicks, because fundamentally seeing them interact, seeing them together, was really fun. It wasn't the episode to do stuff with the extended gang. I hope they do go on to do stuff with the extended gang, because otherwise they might as well have gone off on their own. But that's fine. I'm not worried about. There wasn't time for that this week, and I wouldn't have wanted the distraction. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you mentioned there about sort of like, turning sort of Zuko into sort of a comedic character when he's not really displayed a lot of that before. I think it's a really interesting point, and I do sort of see where you're coming from, but obviously from his perspective, he's not being comedic. It's the he has to boil it down because he's clearly not very good socially. He's never been good socially. So it's about, he wants to try and explain himself quickly and well, but he just doesn't have the... they're drawing humour from his attempts to be normal when he's not grown up normal, he's not been normal. And it's, for me, it actually works well because it isn't different for his character at all. In fact, if anything, it makes perfect sense that his character would have absolutely no idea how to talk to someone else in a way that isn't some sort of vague threat. Like it's again, he doesn't know he's being funny. He's really trying to make these guys like
yeah,
him.
that's fair.
But the show does a really good job of like extracting humor out of that situation. So yeah, I just thought I'd pick up on that point because I thought that was a really interesting observation. And I do think there is a truth to it. Obviously, we do have a character in Zuko that's like, he's been a moody teenager this whole time, but I feel like his attempt to sort of come to them, sort of hands out like I'm here to apologize and help, and I really do think and mean that now. How do you come back from having been trying to murder these people previously, or capture them as they keep rephrasing it in the show? Because like that's the thing, isn't it? It's that line really early on when he's like, well, I don't know if you're aware, but I'm a firebender. I'm actually considered to be pretty good at it, but well, I guess you guys know that because of all the times I used it against you. Like it's just like they're inherently tapping in to an honest awkwardness that would exist between these characters to draw comedy, and I kind of love them for it. There was another nitpick you had about like, it's gone out of my brain. I had two things I wanted to respond to from what you said, and I can't remember.
Was it the use of the gang? But again, I say, completely the right decision for this episode.
No, it was an earlier one related to Zuko. That one I do as well. I agree with. It's like this episode has to focus on that, so the extended gang have to wander off. They just can't be part of it. There's no time. I'm trying to think. It doesn't matter because if I sit here and go, what was it I was going to say, then we'll literally never move on. Yeah, though I do agree with you on the whole lot. I think this is a really, really strong episode. It's kind of like a perfect amalgamation of like plots coming together in a way that's particularly interesting. I think the Combustion Man thing is kind of convenient, but I will say, and I suppose this is one of the wider topics for this because it's my only real criticism of the episode. The logic they use to finally change their minds to at least being willing to let Zuko hang about is, I think, twofold, but shaky as hell. So, the first logic is he did just save them from Combustion Man, right? That's the way that this episode sort of sets it up. They end up on the same side because they're both fighting the same guy, right? Mm-hmm. The other way they do it is they have Aang say this. I'm going to repeat this, and this is true because of the Toph plot. I think you are supposed to be my firebending teacher. When I tried to learn firebending, I burnt Katara, and after that, I never wanted to firebend again. But now I know you understand how easy it is to hurt the people you love. I'd like you to teach me. Now, I'm sure Zuko will get on famously with Toph when they spend more time together. Why not, right? Love seems bold. Because Aang is comparing Zuko's experience accidentally burning Toph with his own experience burning Katara, number one. But number two, wait, what was oh yeah, I would argue that would be a reason not to take Zuko on as a teacher, because he, if anything, just demonstrated his inability to control his fire.
See, I viewed that as kind of spiritual. I viewed it as Aang being like, it feels to him like a sign that they've both experienced something very similar, and therefore the spirits, the world, wants them to come together.
Interesting.
That was my interpretation of what Aang was saying there, because he said in the past, there's another world, as was called back by Zuko, there's another world in which we were friends. I didn't get the vibe from Aang that he was ever completely against the idea. I got the vibe that he was going along with Katara, Sokka, and Toph.
Right. No, they played that perfectly. Aang is not the person that needed convincing, I suppose, here. That's true.
It's essentially Katara and Sokka who, who at the end are both in their own ways, like, well, if that's what you want to do, all right. Like, but obviously, Katara kicks a bit of arse, which we'll come back to. But yeah, I viewed it as quite is it not being so much about the comparison, but the symmetry being a sign.
See, because I would just kind of, for me, like, I kind of wish it was slightly more embedded in, because would it not have been cleaner if Zuko had a history of that in his past? Because the problem is, from my perspective, Zuko's just done that thing. Does that not make him seem unqualified to teach Aang firebending if that's the thing Aang's worried about? Because Zuko just did it like 10 minutes ago. So there's that element of it which I think you can't get around. But the spiritual side of it, I kind of agree with you. Okay, yeah, that's kind of what they were going for. Maybe Aang saw it more of as a sign than a please teach me your version of firebending. But would it not have been cleaner if there'd been some incident maybe in Zuko's past that he talked about, something like that illuminated Aang to that, rather than this kind of like slightly like ham-fisted, like that's not very embedded in Toph thing?
To some degree, every relationship with the master he's had has also been about learning something from each other. So, maybe he's, rather than he can't teach me that because he's literally just done it himself, maybe it's more, well, maybe we'll learn it together then.
Right.
In the same way that Katara and Aang have learned water bending together.
But if that's the intention, say it in the episode, no?
Yeah. No, it's definitely something they could have clarified more, without a doubt.
Because that's what
I did bump up against it as much as you.
Because what I wrote in my notes exactly, word for word, was I wish this had been more embedded in. It works as a reason, but it feels a bit haphazard in execution. So I guess that is kind of where I've landed. Like, I do think there's ways you can make this work, and in talking to you, you've kind of made it work, but not necessarily with the material presented.
Yeah, that's fair.
You've kind of filled in some gaps, which makes sense and works, and that does make me feel better about it, but I wish that had been in the episode and been clearer as an argument.
Yeah. That's fair, I think. But equally, I don't feel that also that I don't think the next episode is gonna be like open with a montage or a bonding moment like that. That awkwardness, like very comedically pointed out by Sokka at the end, where he's like, "Yep, this is weird." I think that's going to run for a bit as well. So maybe some of those elements get explored more as we see them trying to learn together or learn from each other, and see how that training ultimately unfolds itself.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see sort of like, because for me, this is like, as I said like a couple of weeks back now, we're kind of at we're in a really clean run of just absolute top tier episodes of this show.
We better be.
It really hits a stride, towards its climax, as you would hope it would.
I want to see. This is completely irrelevant to the episode, but I think I want to see more Hamill, man. I want to see more Chief Fire dude. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we were watching the previously on with this one because we just sort of stuck it on and just it was playing the intro of the previously on. I didn't even think to skip. Maybe we were finishing a cup of tea, like making a cup of tea before we sat down, so it was just we kind of left it on and paused it once it started. But I was thinking during the intro when I was listening to the bit of dialogue from Hamill from last week, we didn't really talk about the introduction of the Fire Lord as it's been done slowly and sort of steadily with more scenes and more conversations with him. And I think that was one of the longest conversations we've seen him engage in last week. What do we think of the way they've handled the Fire Lord, but also like that particular sequence of him talking to Zuko? I know it's as you said, relevant to this episode, but it's something we missed dissecting last week.
It's great if it pays off, but it has to pay off. Like I've always, ever since you described your first discovery of the show being in, I think you were in like a Games Workshop, weren't you?
It was a comic book store that did Dungeons and Dragons tournaments.
Yeah.
Well, not tournaments, but like Yu-Gi-Oh card tournaments. I'll say it was some game thing. Yeah, you're right. It's exactly right.
You started that, and not that you are, and no one should be, but you started that almost as if you were like, "Whoa, no, Chris, it wasn't Games Workshop." And then as you said the sentence, you were like, "Yep, sounds just like."
No, I just didn't
Games
want
Workshop.
You know what it was?
Chris,
It wasn't even that, because there was a Games Workshop really near me when I was growing up, and I was totally fine. No, it was more about like I don't want anyone to accidentally think I'm into that stuff because I don't have the answers. I like people are gonna. I felt like if it implied that I was into that stuff even younger, I might have gotten questions that I have not fit to answer. I've never been into it, never been able to play it, don't understand it rules wise. So I just didn't want to misinterpret myself as being into that stuff, because I didn't want to get any like tweets, people being like, "Oh, what's your favorite this?" Or sometimes we get questions on the stuff we say on this podcast, and I definitely don't have any knowledge to answer those. So I was quickly correcting for other reasons.
Fair enough. And they said to you it's got such an amazing villain, and even at the time when you said that, and we hadn't really met Chief Fire Dude, I remember thinking it was about Zuko, and then you revealed it was about Fire Dude, and I was like, oh, well, I guess we must see more of him then. Like for someone to say that. So I have faith that we will, but I think we have to start seeing that soon. For me to be like, yeah, it's
possible that I danced around it at the time, not to give anything away. But what the compliment they gave was, more specifically, now we're here, was that the villain was so good because he was so threatening despite minimal presence. They were they were impressed that they'd made the obstacle of defeating this character so seemingly insurmountable, despite the fact we spend so little time with him. And apologies if that gave a false impression of like, because I was obviously trying to dance around the fact that he's often, not often spent time with in the show up to this point. I didn't mean to create expectations by not including that information, but that was how they sold me on it. They said it's like incredible how threatening he feels and how much of an obstacle he is to overcome, yet we barely see him. And I was like, that sounds fascinating. How do they do that? And definitely, I think because at that point as well, keep in mind this is much earlier in the show's run, because I came to the show, I don't know, I can never quite remember where, but certainly prior to season 3, and they were referring to like the Philo, but like in a way when the show was only really referencing him and never even showing him. And they're absolutely right. It is kind of incredible how much of a threat he's constantly felt, despite not actually being directly involved in almost anything at that point. So yeah.
Yeah, it's better, but I think that partly helps. The more you see of a villain, once you've seen Darth Vader go no, he's inherently less threatening. Going back to this episode, what do we think about Katara then, and her threat?
Yeah, I think I sort of accidentally sort of like gave the game away with this one at the beginning of the podcast, because I kind of accidentally started talking about some of the specific elements and rather than just recapping. I'm a huge fan of this. I think it really does work for her character, particularly in the context of, like I said, she's been the only one of these that's been actually betrayed by Zuko, like directly before. Yeah. The rest have all been attacked by Zuko. They've all been, I remember the other point I wanted to make very quickly. You talked about Zuko sort of, devolving it down to good and bad. I thought that was a very specific choice, because he's so unable, and always has been, to articulate his feelings because he's not the most sort of empathetic person. He's not, he's not the communicator his uncle is, put it that way. That even though he knows that it's more complex than that, and maybe when he relaxes a little around these guys, he'll start maybe being a bit more natural and a bit more himself. In this moment, though, his ability to phrase it in a clean, quick, and understandable way has left him basically on purpose. That's an intentional choice they've made because they've been well, actually, he probably would struggle to explain this. So that's all part of that awkwardness of hi, Zuko here. I'm good now, I promise. Because he just wants to make them understand and make them understand quickly. And his words are letting him down. I felt that was a very deliberate choice and something I really appreciated about the episode.
That's fair. I think it's because it's been used other times in the show, but then
it's shorthand.
Yeah, but again, I don't think that's a bad thing. And also, I think it's, if I was to sit here going, oh, they're terming it good and bad, someone could easily be like, it's a fucking children's cartoon, dude. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you have to. You haven't got long for nuance, and this show does a lot of nuance, very, very well. But yeah, I think, like you say, someone who can't articulate something very well, it would make sense for them to go, no, I'm good now.
Right. And that's the other thing as well is because the problem with good and bad in that context is the villain shouldn't see themselves as being good or bad. The villain, Philo Dozai doesn't think he's the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
That's the point. I think Azula thinks she's the bad guy. I think she very intentionally wants to be the bad guy. She's a different beast. But you're right. The show gets away with it, I think, because it's a bunch of teenagers, and of course they're going to boil it down to good and bad. But the show demonstrates in its wiser moments, in the moments it matters, nuance. How many times have we talked about the show's ability to make you understand that the Fire Nation aren't just a bunch of inherently evil beings? They're just people living their lives, and their government essentially is handling things horribly. They're a country that's warring with other countries for no reason really, other than ego. It's and sort of nationalism almost. It's a really the show does have that complexity there. So the fact that the teenaged or children characters sometimes phrase it in a really boiled down way is actually kind of clever because it's a shorthand that allows them to not have to explain the nuance outright every single time, but it also makes sense in context because to a 12-year-old like Aang, it's probably the world is a bit more black and white. I think people grow up and learn that kind of nuance. It makes sense the characters would use those phrases. Maybe not Zuko. You'd argue Zuko, maybe Sokka, some of the older characters of the gang would maybe at this point be getting a little bit above that. But again, as I pointed out, Zuko's awkwardness overrode, I think, everything this week.
Yeah, and also, was incredibly entertaining, which is, the main thing. Like I say, all of anything I nitpicked on, the smallest of nitpicks, had a blast with this episode.
Right.
The combustion man sequence was great, really inventive. The boomerang, we've not even talked about that. The boomerang of it was brilliant. Sokka kind of winning the day. And I'd also
Sokka winning the day and probably murdering a man. Let's be honest.
Well, yeah, that's not cool, obviously, if we view it like that. But, he was trying to murder them.
If someone tries to murder you, just murder them right back.
I don't think I responded on the Katara one.
Comment below if you immediately recognised what that quote was from, dear listeners. If I said that and you went, oh, I know what that's from, stick it in the comments below.
What was the quote from?
I'm not going to say. I want to see people get it. I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay. Fair enough. Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, that would spoil the game.
No, yeah, stick it in the comments below. But don't Google it. You could Google it. You'll get a GIF. You'll get a GIF with the text on it. I'm sure from the thing that it's from. But don't do that. That's not fun.
I don't think I responded on the Katara thing.
Yes, I was literally you stole my segue. I was about to say let's get back to the Katara thing because I got I got to explain myself almost twice for Katara this week. You haven't had a chance to talk about your thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's almost it's great, but it does kind of make you go, ooh, like it makes you shiver a bit. It makes you go, oh, blimey, especially when she is essentially saying, I'll kill you.
Right.
Like, you kind of go, oh shit, and obviously that she could bloodbend and
100%.
Literally kill him.
And she is so capable, and that's what's great about like the work they do with Katara in this season, for sure. By the time you get to here, you believe she's capable. Like that's the thing, isn't it? It's like they always make her the mother of the gang, but yeah, a mother will fucking kill for her kids. Like
yeah, take a shot, Mrs. Weasley. Not my daughter, you bitch.
Yes. Right. It's a really interesting character trait, and it's again they've worked their way up to this, showing you that when forced, Katara is an absolute badass. Then you put her in this situation where like Aang and Sokka and Toph, the people that she loves, basically, her sort of adopted family. Essentially, that's kind of how they all see each other. If you threaten them, oh yeah, I'm going to take your head off your shoulders. I'm going to make a big ice blade and I'm going to lop it right off. And you think you're going to run away? No, I'm going to bloodbend you first so you don't move.
Now that we brought up bloodbending, I almost want Zuko to know about it and like have that moment of him being like, well, you should totally use that. Like him being kind of like war strategic about it. And being like, but that could make the difference, and that them two coming to blows with that, because Aang, Sokka, despite how strategic Sokka is, Toph, I believe all of them are just going to go, we see what it did to you, we don't want that to happen again, fair enough. Yeah. Whereas Zuko might be a bit more, no, like, well, we should use this trick.
There's a number of ways they could do that, actually, because essentially what the plot you've suggested there boils down to is the idea that Zuko might come up with a plan that's less moral because of his habitual like being a villain, like who doesn't care who he hurts to get what he wants. There's a chance they might set up a situation. Bloodbending, maybe any other thing, where Zuko's going to suggest something that's going to hurt people or be immoral. It's sort of a Jet situation, where the Fire Nation were in that village and he was going to flood the whole village just to get at the Fire Nation, and it bumped up against the gang's morals. Zuko's probably got some learning to do in terms of being quote unquote good. It's not going to come naturally to someone who's grown up taking what he wants because he was brought up to believe that. And actually, that's one of the things I loved so much about this episode as well. And take a shot, Dan, to talking about how Toph's his favorite character, but wasn't it incredible?
What?
Did you not know? I'm sorry.
No.
Toph's my favourite character. Has not become clear?
I was expecting you to open this episode weeping about Toph's feet, but you kept it together.
Holding a funeral for Toph's feet. What's great about the characterization in this episode is that of all of these characters, the character who's most likely to understand that someone is not necessarily who they're brought up to be on the inside, it's Toph. Right?
She's
brought up prim and proper, but actually wanted to just get in the mud and, be herself and run off with the badger moles and cause some chaos. That's like Toph knows that who you're brought up by and what you're brought up to be is not necessarily who you are on the inside. And I think her immediate, well, wait a minute, I didn't think he was lying. So I'm going to go, I think he maybe deserves a chance here. It was perfect. It just made so much sense that she's the character that thinks that way. Because also, she's the one that spent that time with Iroh too. So she really does know this good in him because she was with Iroh and Iroh explained that there was conflict in Zuko.
Yeah, she's had the Iroh connection, and also a lot of Zuko's solo hunt for the guys was series 1. Like Toph also hasn't been exposed to do as much. Like whenever I don't know the exact numbers, but I would assume whenever she's been in battles that have involved Zuko, it's also involved Azula, or whatever her name is. Like
wow, Azula. Iggy Azula.
Azula. And the other characters.
I just had to mock you until you got it right. Maybe that's the new tactic. When we start Legend of Korra and you have to start all over again learning names and pronouncing them wrong, maybe I'm just going to bully you into getting them right.
Well, you're always bullying me for something. So
no, it's okay, Chris. I'm good now.
I'm Dan.
Hi, Dan here. I'm good now. And I'm if you want me to teach you how to bully someone, I'm actually pretty good at that. I have you know that because I've done it at you so much.
I really enjoyed speaking of comic lines, I really enjoyed not only the notion that Appa remembered Zuko and was happy to see him and licked him and stuff, but also the bit where Zuko just goes, I mean, I set your bison free. That's one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's funny, because I couldn't remember if the show overtly pointed it out. So I was making all these excited notes, because Zuko lands, he starts talking, Appa's immediately licking him and nuzzling him or whatever, and they're ignoring it to start with, and Zuko's just talking to the gang, and I'm like, oh, I hope they don't reference it, because what a cool little thing. I'm going to go into the podcast and I'm going to be like, hey Chris, did you notice that Appa seemed to like Zuko? If you remember, Zuko set him free. I was like, I hope they don't make it overt, so it can be a subtle thing that I've noticed. No, they immediately reference it and explain it, and I'm like, yeah. That's fine, but now I have one less talking point for the podcast, I guess.
Yeah. Heaven forbid they concentrate on the quality of the show and not your ability to be smug.
Exactly, Chris. As we have established,
maybe they had faith.
As we established, if you want someone to teach you how to be smug, I'm pretty good at it, and you know that's true because of all the times I've done it in front of you.
I was going to say, I think their thinking was, if anyone can find another way to be smug, it's Dan.
Yeah. Well, he'll figure it out.
We're good.
So I love that Appa stuff particularly. I thought that was really well done. It was such a nice the show. Another thing that I always want to compliment the show for is, and I know we said this a lot this season, so I am sorry, but of its time, the contemporaries to this show weren't as intricate as this. Zuko frees Appa in one episode. It's basically erased by the next, in another show from this era, because they were very episodic and the contents of one episode didn't necessarily influence another, in a lot of the cartoons that were airing at the time. That attention to detail. And I say a lot because I know not all, I know Samurai Jack has a really awesome, memory and likes to bring stuff back in just when you think the show's kind of forgotten it. And it's a wonderful show and another great example of when animation is at its finest. But other than a couple of small examples, most TV at the time wasn't doing that. So even that small, let's acknowledge the last time Zuko interacted with this gang was at Ba Sing Se, and therefore was when he freed Appa. Let's not forget that element. It's just that consistency really does make the show come alive in ways that other animated shows don't. It's a small detail, but it makes a difference.
Yeah, no, completely agree. It's just, I think there's just, you watch this episode and you just smile throughout, don't you? There's so many small details. There's so many fun moments. I really like what they're doing with Zuko's character, and also it sets up really interesting. They're gonna be firebending together. He's gonna be trying to teach him the dynamics of that. Are almost too interesting because they distract from. There is still that impending comet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's the episode is working on all levels because you just you go through it. Right, the music, as always, just incredible. The visuals, the Eastern Air Temple, we've not the fact that the design of that temple hasn't come up in this podcast yet is an absolute testament to all the things that are going on in this episode that are incredible. Because in any other episode, you go, like it's one of the third. It's like the third thing you say. How great was the design of the Eastern Air Temple? But here it's like the 25th thing you say because like there's so much other good stuff, you know. But yeah, like that upside down, like under the sort of cavern of the rock, those like almost like pagoda. Is pagoda the right word? You know, but like attached sort of in a sort of downward, sort of triangular like thing, so that the base, which is where it connects, is at the top, and it goes down into a point. That's just genius. Like what cool design. That first shot when they get there and they're like, oh, it's underneath us, and the camera sort of pans down. No, it's not a camera because it's drawn, but you know, the frame pans down and you reveal it. It's just so cool because it's just what, you know, we've seen 3 other air temples at this point and they all looked, you know, kind of the same. You know, there were little differences, but
also the transition of it pans down and you expect to see them climbing down it, but it's actually Zuko. Like, that's a really nice shot.
Right, yes it is. Yeah, you're right. That's also very cool. Because at that point, I don't think they've established that Zuko has basically caught up to them.
Yeah, no. I think that's the reveal of that.
Yeah, that's also very cool. And then, of course, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is this episode has flashbacks to Zuko visiting this very temple. Which makes perfect sense, by the way, because it'll be the closest one to it is physically the closest one to the Fire Nation, with it being the Eastern Air Temple. And I love that everyone they visited geographically has made sense to where they are. They visited the Southern when they were at the Southern Water Tribe. They visited the Northern when they went to the Northern Water Tribe. Last year, when they were mucking about in the Earth Kingdom, which is more west, they went to the Western Air Temple, and this year they've mostly been in the Fire Nation, and here we are at the Eastern Air Temple. I know it's simple and it doesn't matter, but like, yes, like just
yeah, no, it's great. Like you say, attention to detail.
Yeah, those sort of things just really build up and make a lot of sense. But the idea as well that this is the first one Zuko visited plays into that too.
Clearly, fairly fresh from his battle.
Right, from the agony with his father. Absolutely, his eyes bandaged, and like the idea of like showing Zuko's growth by having him visit this place again. It's the first place he visited when he became truly the villain that we grew to know in the first season. You know, I'm going to capture the Avatar, restore my honor. To go from that to him here now, like basically begging to help Aang take out his father, like just genius.
Yeah, no,
and you know, it gives us some Iroh, which this season has been sorely missing, I feel.
Yeah, and I really thought the picture, you know, him looking at the picture of Iroh at the end was a really nice touch.
Yes.
I thought that was really sweet. There was some other minor touch I was going to comment on, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah, the fact that, you know, he's missing him so clearly. And, you know, I really love maybe this is your excuse to talk about the impressions, but I love even when I'm impersonating him, I still can't understand him.
Right.
I thought that was very funny as well. Yeah, I think it makes so much sense. And also just adds a nice symmetry. And I love that we kind of opened and closed with the flashbacks. I love it, Dan. I just love it when a show is very clear and concise with its flashbacks. You know, when we cut to a flashback and you go, oh, this is going to be a scene long, and then come out of it, as opposed to, you know, not knowing whether the flashback's going to be 30 seconds or the entire episode. Anyway, on a completely separate note, I'm looking forward to reviewing Boba Fett with you tomorrow. That should be fun. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, for those listening, it's you'll be hearing this, you know, sort of probably April or later. But we're in. It's just turned February for us, and yeah, we're in the throes of Boba Fett and its inability to know if it's a show about Boba Fett or a show about a very different character.
Yeah, it's at the moment. It's my nomination for most sort of baffling cancellation decision because you know what show decides to cancel itself halfway through.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll come to that. If you want to hear our thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett, then check out Nothing But Static. Was it 2:30? Whatever we're up to. Where are we up to on Nothing But Static? 2:30 something. No, 2:41. Wow. Okay, there you go. 2:41. Tune in for that. Yeah, so I think the flashbacks are great. I think it's just nice to see Zuko again. I will say, in terms of the impressions, the one thing I thought, right, at what point does Zuko get his late night show? And it starts with, there's jazz music, whatever. It's Zuko tonight. And then it cuts into the studio and he's like, hi there, Zuko here. And he's like, in the news, my father has invaded another Earth Kingdom town. He's all like, son, you'll never be he's just doing impressions. The whole thing is basically like Stephen Colbert, but he's impersonating his dad.
No, he doesn't. It's so much, but it's like that kind of, and I hate to say it because some stand-ups I love fell into this later in their career, but it's that slightly bad stand-up thing of just taking two things that aren't connected and doing an impression of it. So it's like, God, what if my dad was buying chips? And it's like, do you want yours fried? No, I'll have them. But no, a better one would be, what if my dad's making toast? Like, it gets delivered to him, and he's all like, this isn't burnt enough for me. And they're like, well, you could do it yourself. Like, it's like, fine, and he kills them all. I don't know. I didn't have an ending when I started that bit, but yeah.
I just like the idea that like Zuko's secretly a really good impressionist because both his Zuko and Azula impressions are excellent. I thought he got all right, do they sound like the characters if I was to close my eyes? No, obviously not. But does he capture their spirit? Like, does he embody their tone and approach to their sentences? Yes, he absolutely does, and he absolutely nails Iroh's rambling, thoughtful, like sort of spiritualism. And I've written the quote down, Chris. If you'll permit me to repeat what he thinks, what advice he thinks his uncle would give him at this stage. Would you like me to repeat it?
Please do.
It's, Zuko, you have to look within yourself to save yourself from your other self. Only then will your true self reveal itself. That is very spot on Iroh nonsense. And as he points out, that is meaningless. Like, that is just gibberish as a sentence. It's very good. So yeah, we just need to figure out getting Zuko a late night show. And I think, how some late night shows have like a second person, like the Andy Richter on Conan or whatever. I think Zuko's should be Toph. Because in this week's episode, Toph absolutely floored me with they're talking about Aang being taught by Zhong Zhong, who is obviously a character from season 1 that Toph didn't interact with. And what I love is that she basically is the voice of anybody who's forgotten that character, because we're 2 years have literally passed if you're watching this live, and she just says, "Who's Zhong Zhong? Who cares? If it's important, I'll find out."
And what was so funny about that is it's such a kind of modern adult style and type of humour, and there's no reason to put it in the episode other than the joke. If anything, it takes you out the episode slightly. Right. But I like to think someone in the writing room really fought for that and was like, no, it's funny enough to justify, put it in. And I 100%. Completely rubber stamp that decision.
Yeah, because I got to imagine, right, for some people, they genuinely had forgotten Zhong Zhong. Understandable. He's not appeared in the show since season 1. And, like, I totally could see somebody going, who's Zhong Zhong? And then Toph just like, yeah, who's Zhong Zhong? Like, it's just like, I don't know, that idea that, like, the show is reassuring you, don't worry, it's not important, by having Toph say that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it's like, it's both a great joke, and it also actually functions as the episode hand-waving its own reference away. So yeah, I really enjoyed that about it. I thought that was very, very good. One thing I did think, though, I think some people could levy at this episode as a criticism, is it is a bit convenient they're suddenly talking about Aang needing a firebending teacher again, and then Zuko shows up. I personally don't feel that criticism, because I think the way they get away with it is, it does make sense. That Sokka idea of the new plan, well, that's the old plan. We just go back to plan A. Plan B didn't work out. Let's revert to Aang learns all the elements and fights the Fire Lord head on before the comet. So for me, it makes perfect sense. This is the episode they'd start talking about Aang getting a firebending teacher. Like, naturally.
Oh, yeah.
Even regardless of the convenience of Zuko dropping out of the sky, literally.
Yeah, that whole, send away the spares and the original gang try and work out what to do next felt very natural and correct, and yeah, completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, because I feel like we could have come into this and you'd have been quite reasonable, I think, to say, very convenient they suddenly start thinking about Aang firebending again and here's the teacher. And I think that is technically a valid criticism, and I wouldn't disagree with someone who felt that way, but I didn't, and that's kind of why. So yeah, the new plan is the old plan. Thought that was good. Should we have you got any other overall thoughts, or should I go through a couple of smaller notes?
No. Give me the smaller notes.
I mean, we've covered the Eastern Air Temple is just the fucking coolest, which is literally how I wrote it in my notes. Is just the fucking coolest. I wrote memories. Remember that time I was a dick to my uncle? I don't know why. Why was I in such a fucking weird mood when I wrote these notes? You can tell. It's such a strange thing to write. But yeah, like literally, he remembers being at the East Air Temple, and what he remembers is, Uncle Iroh obviously just nailing it and being like, maybe this isn't the path, and him being like, shut up, Uncle, I'm gonna find the Avatar. It's just like, so dismissive. And how stupid Zuko must feel now. But we all do that, don't we? Look back on our decisions when we were younger and go, God, I was an idiot. So it's not inconsistent. It's just.
I remember this time someone I went to uni with was like, "Should we start a podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Not realizing
10 years.
Not realizing I was giving up at this point, presumably, months of my life.
Yep. 10 years. Well, it's been 10 years, Chris.
But I mean, like, I reckon probably solid months. Like, within that 10 years, we haven't podcasted for all 10 years. So I'm talking if you take out the time.
What are you talking about, Chris? When you hang up the phone, I'm still here talking to myself into this microphone. I've been podcasting for 10 years.
Constantly. Running the Truman podcast.
Yeah. The thing is, just you're like an occasional guest star. Like, I'm like, oh, Chris is actually going to be on the podcast today, everyone. Been a week since we last recorded. It's just been me. It's getting a bit tired.
I'm Tom.
That's why I'm always so enthusiastic when I introduce you on this podcast. So look, everyone, it's Chris, the late Airbender.
Woo! What other little notes you got before we continue down that?
I love the opening, following the disaster and of the thing, Aang reverting back to I just want to play. Right at the beginning, he wants to run off with the other guys and play around, and Katara has to sort of bring him down to earth and be a bit motherly. But again, it's kind of working for her this season. Like she's less of a frustrating, pious character now for some reason. I think it is right. I think it's a combination of they're writing her better, but also like the more you understand that character, the less irritating the trait becomes, I guess. But you got to give him credit for consistency because she's behaved that way since season 1. It's just it works better now for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I never bumped up against that. I never found it particularly irritating anyway.
Let's see. Also Aang like flying off and ignoring them when they were like, Aang, we need to talk about what we're gonna do, and he's like, oh, the wind's really loud in my ear. I can't talk about my future because I'm learning firebending right now because I'm flying around and it's like the wind's in my ear. Like that whole scene made me chuckle.
Yeah, that was fun.
I also just loved the subtle when they referred to him as Combustion Man, and Zuko just slips in, well, that's not his name, but and then carries on with what he's saying. We never find out his name, but the idea that to Zuko it's so strange they're calling him Combustion Man.
Yeah, it's just that
he's like, that's Jim. What are you talking about?
It was so amused. It was so well delivered. Like, well, that's not his name, but all right.
Right. Actually, we should take a second here. That's a great point to jump off on Dante Basco, who voices who voices Zuko, who I think will be coming up with on Rewind Reviews at some point, because I am at some point definitely going to suggest we do the Robin Williams film Hook, for Rewind Reviews, one of my favorites as a kid. That'll come up eventually, I think. And Dante Basco is a major character in that movie when he was a kid. Obviously he's grown up now than voicing a teenager still, which is unfortunate, but he's a wonderful actor. He's very, very good, and he really brings Zuko to life. And what I think is a kind of a miracle is that because maybe they did know when they started this show that they were going to have Zuko turn, so they found an actor that could do both convincingly. Or maybe they just fucking lucked out and got an extremely talented voice actor who was able to sort of play Zuko as this very clear, outright, I'll get you next time, Avatar villain, and then switch him round to this kind of awkward, I'm good now, promise, character that he plays here, but he just nails all of it. Like, it's such good voice work.
He's brilliant.
I mean, the cast of the show are always awesome and on fire every week. Like, we don't give to be fair, we don't give the cast enough credit on this podcast. We maybe we should start doing more of that. Because true. They are brilliant. But I specifically want to single out Dante Basco this week because I just think this really is such a different thing they need from him than he's been giving. The angry teenager behind him trying his hardest to be sort of softer and nicer and convincing, like, just let me in, sort of, I don't know, I'm not maybe explaining myself very well, but like, it's such a good performance and he really sells it.
No, I agree, they're all brilliant, but in particular this episode he's fantastic.
One little I'll tell you what, Chris, get your shoes, get your coat, get your bag, off to Nitpick Corner.
Oh, here we are.
Stunning. Toph thinks Zuko was sincere when he was speaking because she's lie detector feet, yeah? Didn't we just establish Zuko's sister was able to get around that last week? Is it not reasonable that
that's true.
Azula can cheat the lie detecting feat that Zuko can too? And I'm not saying Toph should have questioned it. It's cleaner for this episode, much cleaner for this episode, if we just do it the way we do it without having Toph also wobble. She's our link. She's the one that reaches out. Without her, maybe the rest of the episode doesn't happen, right? Because Zuko just leaves. But yeah, there's a. I think it's weird that Toph doesn't question it at least a little.
That's very... well, I don't think it's weird that Toph doesn't reference it in a way because she obviously doesn't want to think it's that easy to cheat it. But that is very worthy of a nitpick. You are right. We literally just saw like that not be the case.
Right, and if I had a power that had worked all my life, and I found someone who could... get round it, seemingly mere hours ago. It really feels like they just got out of the fire, like that area of the fire station. I'd be thinking about it. I'd be going, fucking hell, that power I thought I had is fallible after all. I can't believe it. Oh, Zuko here. I'm good now. Wait a minute. You're literally the brother of the person who just got around this.
Maybe, though, the Appa, because isn't it her that says, Appa does seem to like him?
Maybe, yeah, but, I don't know, but but later on she talks about how she sensed it with her feet, he was being sincere when he talked, and I was just like, I don't know, shouldn't you be wondering about the person who was just able to get around that? Realistically, that's what should be happening. For the story, it's not the right thing to do at all, and I would rather have this nitpick, but the episode play out as it does, than the alternative, which is muddying the plot for the sake of that nitpick. But yeah, it's still there.
Yeah, well, you don't have to muddy the plot. I can tell he's being sincere with my feet, and then you just have to have Aang or Sokka say, "Yeah, but Azula faked that, so he could too." You don't have to muddy the plot. It could just be a sentence.
Right, so you give the doubt to someone else, not to Toph, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right, because it would muddy the plot if it's Toph questioning it, because the plot is that she's the one that believes him. But you're saying it would have to be Sokka, because Aang and Katara weren't present for that moment. Yeah. So it would have to be Sokka that says, but wait a minute, didn't Azula just get around this? There you go. Yeah.
Is Aang not? I thought Aang was with Sokka and...
No, Aang was... Where was Aang? Oh, no, you're right. Yeah, you're right. No, Aang was with them. Sorry, in my head, Aang was off with the Fire Lord, but no, he wasn't. That was Zuko. Sorry, you're absolutely right. Aang was present for that.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah.
My bad. The one thing I did write down as a question to ask you, Chris, is I think they get away with it, but you could argue that they almost make too convincing an argument for why they should literally never trust Zuko, that maybe they create an argument that they can't overcome by the end. Like, the point when, like, they tell Zuko to leave the first time and, like, he tries to move forward and they attack him and they cover him in water and they're like, get out, we can't trust you, we'll never be able to trust you. And literally Aang says, we'll never let you join. But they give so many good reasons for the thousands of times Zuko has attacked them or whatever. Do you think that, like, they almost create too strong an argument for the episode to manually overcome why with him saving them from helping save them from Combustion Man, and the whole stuff about that we talked about earlier with him, learning that fire can be dangerous and can hurt the ones around you. I don't know. How did you feel about that? Do you think they get away with it? Do you think it's because I don't feel that way, but I did note it down as a possible criticism someone might have.
No, I kind of think everything we said earlier about, like, I think it's a bit convenient, Combustion Man, but I viewed it as, I think they've got those reasons, but when my interpretation, and I know you had a slightly different one, but my interpretation of Aang's, okay, this is a sign, this is what the universe, the spirits want to happen, is going to overrule what the arguments they've made. And, I think, again, it's little things like him saying, okay, well, if you can't accept me as a friend, accept me as a prisoner. And him, almost volunteering to atone for the sins of the past, to some degree. I think across all those things, they do enough.
Yeah, I would agree. It's not something I bumped up against, but it's something I wrote down as like a possible criticism someone could have against the episode. Yeah,
I think in a way, sort of, any other detail would just be repeating what we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. So the only other thing I've got written down is just the incredible line, "Why am I so bad at being good?" which Zuko utters after he accidentally burns Toph's feet. Just incredible.
I liked it. Again, great performance, beautifully animated. The sheer panic and the sheer no of Zuko in that moment was really endearing, and really really sweet, because they've done enough obviously to show the audience, but having a moment like that just again highlights how much he's changed. And I think the performance and the way that was animated were all brilliant.
Yep, 100% agree. 100% agree. Fantastic episode. Good work. Final thoughts on the episode is it's absolutely brilliant. It's a couple of nitpicks aside, I think it's genuinely one of the best episodes of the show. And I think it does scratch the itch and does fulfill the promise the last scene of the final episode made.
Yes, completely. Yeah, well, it definitely, like I say, I watched it right away, and it definitely satisfied that itch.
Yeah.
Let's trivia it up.
Let's give you some trivia. Right. So I'll get through the trivia really quickly, and we won't do a listener question this week because we're on a bit of a timer, and also we've only got one left, and I might as well save it. I need to put a request out for more. Anyway. So this episode was apparently part of an event called Countdown to the Comet, where they actually aired this and the next handful of episodes together as like how they used to do that with Steven Universe, didn't they? They'd like do like a couple of episodes released across a week, and they'd give it like a title, like Wanted or whatever. That's kind of what they did here. They released this and the subsequent sort of, I think, 5 episodes as countdown to the comet, leading up to the finale itself. And this was the first episode, as we discussed last week, to be aired after an 8-month hiatus. So think how excited you were to watch this next episode. It was 8 months, unless you lived in Canada for some reason. Then it was shorter. Or found it online, presumably following that Canadian airing. So, working titles during production were Zuko's Cool and What About Zuko? And if you're thinking those names are kind of sad, apparently it was really rife that like unaired episode titles were getting onto the internet. So Zuko's Cool was actually just a working joke title they used internally to sort of foil leakers from getting the real title ahead of time.
Right.
But I still enjoy the title.
Yeah, I'm glad they did. I'm glad it wasn't real, but yeah, it's a fun bit of trivia.
Yeah. So now all 4 air temples have been revealed. Southern, Northern, Eastern air temples were all revealed in Southern Air Temple, Northern Air Temple, and we got the the Northern one. No, not Northern. Eastern one was revealed in Appa's Lost Days initially, but then obviously Aang goes back to it in the season 2, just before the season 2 finale, to meet Guru Patik and to talk about chakras. So according to the Nickelodeon website, Combustion Man did indeed die after Sokka's boomerang hit his head because the impact closed his third eye chakra. Oh, there you go. That was good timing. Causing him to explode when he tried to use the power. So once again, I repeat, chakras.
Sokka killed a man.
Sokka killed a man.
That was the other alternative title of the episode.
Yeah, it was Zuko's Cool or Sokka kills a dude. Brian and Mike have revealed, the 2 creators of the show, revealed in a commentary that they did actually want Teo, Haru, and the Duke exploring the temple to be a part of this episode. They really wanted to have that as like almost the B plot, but ultimately, they accepted that time would not allow for this. And I'm glad they came to that realization because...
Yeah, it would have distracted.
Yeah, I would agree. That is... So yeah, I think we did it. We did it in, 54 minutes. That'll be a nice relief to listeners after last week's mess.
Really? I've got an hour and 7 minutes.
Oh, no, you're right. So do I. I was looking at the amount of time left on the microphone, not the amount of time we've been recording. Wow, we've done an hour and 7 on this? Jesus, okay.
Yeah, so there was... That explains it then, because there was a bit where you were like, yeah, so I've got a little question for you, and it was like an hour, and we just talked about how we were keeping it concise, and in my head I was like, really?
Yeah, sorry, I thought we were much sooner. Oh, man, wow. All right, well, there you go. We'll move it on. So thank you all for listening. As usual, you can support us in all the various ways. If you go to the Patreon, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, you can give us money. And if you do that, then that gives you episodes 1 week early. So if you want to hear the next episode of this podcast right now, go over and join the Patreon. If you're already on the Patreon, sorry, then you're already ahead. Can't help you. But you do also get the ability to ask us questions, which we answer on the podcast occasionally when we're not on a tight time schedule like today. We have a good question coming up next week, so tune in for that. I don't think you've been treating it like we've been on a tight schedule. You've been treating it like we've been leisurely. Well, I thought we would be. I thought we had plenty of time. I thought we were only like 45, 50 minutes in. I apologies. I'm about my sense of time has gone out the window apparently because we're like an hour and 7 minutes. I had no idea. So yeah, apologies. I got tricked by glancing. Yeah, I see what I've done. I glanced under the pop shield, and all I could see was the time left on the mic, not the time we've been recording for.
Yeah, that's fine.
So yeah, you can also go support Raphodraws, who supplies us with that great piece of art of Appa and the gang front of the sun. Instagram.com/Raphodraws or launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws for access to their Tumblr and Twitter and YouTube and Redbubble account where you can buy all sorts of things with great art from Rapho. Other things you can do, give us a like or a review or a subscribe or interact with the podcast some way on some sort of platform. I know that's a vague, strange thing to say, but yeah, it helps because it tells those algorithms you enjoyed it, and then it says, well, maybe other people will enjoy it, and it shares it with them. So that's a way to get us to other people. Another way you can do that is, of course, telling a friend. You do that too. We appreciate that also. But yeah, I think that's everything. Oh yeah, Twitter, @DanDoolan, @CBillingham, if you have any thoughts about this episode or the fact that we've somehow managed to go over again, despite the fact I thought we'd actually kept it tight this week. Mail @nothingbutstatic.co.uk if you have any other thoughts on our sudden inability to keep this podcast at about an hour like we used to. I don't know how that's happened. So there you go. Thanks for even when we cut the question. Dear Lord, you can tell that's really bothered me.
I mean, I can tell you how it's happened, Dad. You've forgotten how to tell the time.
Well, I've read the wrong number, but I feel betrayed by my microphone. That's what's happened.
If you looked at the actual time, that would also tell you, like, wait a sec, we started an hour and 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm engaged with our podcast and our conversation, and I'm not clock watching as we record, Chris. You might.
It explains it though, because there was a point where I was literally thinking, it feels like Dan's trying to pad this out, and seemingly you were.
Yeah, I thought we were coming under.
Yeah. It's just, I swear, you'll probably be able to hear me thinking, really? At the bit where you're like, I've got a question for you. And like, I glance at the thing and I'm like, we're an hour in. Like, we've not done triv yet. Why are you chucking out thought-provoking questions?
Amazing. Listeners, do go back into the podcast and see if you can find the moment that Chris did that. Put the time code of it in the comments below if you think you figured it out, and we'll see.
It's also why if you listen back to my answer to that, where you're essentially asking something like, you're saying, your question is basically, and now I'm aware I'm now padding things out, and I'm the one that needs to go, but your question is essentially, they come up with some really good reasons not to trust him. Do you think they did enough to make you believe they trust him? The second part of the question we'd already discussed early on, so you can even tell that my answer is like, we covered it. I think I even say something like,
it all makes sense now, Chris. I can see clearly now.
Anyway,
so yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We love you as always. Keep at it. Tell a friend or just keep listening. That supports us too.
You know what, Dan, though? I imagine some people are pleased that we've gone over, but we are... Because that's the other thing, mate. People will be looking at this time code after the last 2 weeks and going, oh, fucking hell, what tangent do we take this week? It's all Avatar, baby.
Yeah, pretty much all Avatar this week, which is unusual compared to the last few weeks. But yeah, that's everything for this week. I'm going to end it. I'm doing it, Chris. I'm putting an end to this. Thank you, everyone so much for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we're going to tease Chris a little bit here by telling him that come back next week when we sit down to discuss the Firebending Masters.
Ooh.
Oh, that was I don't know if I liked that at all. What was that noise?
Bit too sexual for you, was it?
No, it was no, the opposite. It was like Igor. Like, oh, master, what is this? It was like, what? I don't know what you were doing.
Cool.
Dear Lord.
Are we done?
Oh, no, I'm still recording, apparently.
Oh, so am I. Literally never end. Come back next week to hear us have the same discussion 3 different ways across 90 minutes.
You wouldn't know we've been podcasting for 10 years, would we? Would you?